Okay, so I'm back, part 2. Some people hoped to stay out of the war entirely. The religion of the Quakers and the Mennonites did not allow them to fight, although some did take sides. Others were not free to express openly their true feelings, but were expected to go along with the view of their households. These included slaves and indentured servants, men and women who had to work for someone else for a number of years to pay off a debt. You could not always be sure how someone felt about the war. There were no lines dividing each side. Your family might be patriots and your next door neighbor might be a loyalist. In some families, a couple of family members would travel to Britain and the rest would stay in the colonies. In this way, the family was sure to be on the winning side no matter which side won. How would your life have changed after the Declaration of Independence? The Declaration of Independence was written mainly by Thomas Jefferson and adopted by the Continental Congress in 1776. The Declaration listed 27 ways the king had hurt the colonies. Patriots agreed with the Declaration. They now viewed the colonies as 13 states making one nation. The Declaration divided many families, friends, and neighbors. Some patriots were against British taxes, but didn't favor a total break with Britain. John Dickerson, a member of Congress from Philadelphia, spoke out strongly, saying, "Declaring our independence at a time like this is like burning down our house before we have another." Some of these patriots began siding with the British and even moved to England. Men who wanted independence went to fight with the Continental Army or with their local militia. In Massachusetts, they were known as Minutemen because they could get ready for a fight in a minute. More soldiers came from Massachusetts and Connecticut than any other area. With men away from home, family life changed. Women had to run farms and manage businesses. Children helped harvest crops and made sure animals were fed and watered. Sometimes fathers and brothers would return home to help plant or harvest crops and then go back to their units and the fighting. Money could be scarce for soldiers' families because soldiers often didn't get paid for over a year. What happened to the Loyalist families after the Declaration? After the Declaration of Independence was adopted, life became difficult for Loyalists. Some left and went to Canada or England. If you stayed, you probably kept quiet. You and your family could show your feelings only if you felt protected by British troops. You might have moved to Georgia, New Jersey, or New York, where there were large numbers of Loyalists. Loyalists had to pay heavy taxes on their property. They couldn't buy or sell land. In some areas, the land and belongings of Loyalists were taken, and the people forced to leave to seek help from other Loyalists. Sometimes patriots attacked them or burned their homes. Loyalists couldn't vote or hold public office. They couldn't be lawyers or teachers. Some loyalists were put in jail or had to pay money as a promise that they would not help the British troops. A Declaration of Dependence was written late in 1776 and signed by 700 loyalists. This only made the Patriots more angry. How could you tell who was a patriot? Most towns had a committee of safety made up of 12 men. Patriots would swear to the committee that they would no longer support or obey King George or the soldiers or citizens of England. But just their word wasn't enough. Each man had to bring in 2 or 3 other men, called Friends of Freedom, to back him up. If the committee believed the promise, the patriot was given a pass. Men needed to pass to travel safely through areas where patriots were strong. Women and children needed passes if they were traveling alone. Patriots who owned businesses advertised that they would not stock British goods. Others refused to shop at stores that sold British items. They stopped drinking tea as a sign of loyalty. They drank coffee or Liberty tea, brewed from strawberry, raspberry, mint, or other kinds of leaves instead. Patriots called themselves Americans, as well as Virginians and New Englanders. If you saw a man wearing a medal with a picture of a tree on it, you knew he was a member of the Sons of Liberty, a group of patriots well known throughout the colonies. Many towns had a Liberty tree. It might be a real tree or just a pole, where patriots met to talk and plan. The number 13 was important to the patriots because there were 13 colonies. It was often used as a signal. Some women wore their hair in 13 curls as a sign of their support for the patriots. After the Declaration of Independence was adopted in 1776, patriot families celebrated the 4th of July as a holiday. Towns planned a day of festivities, including gun salutes, patriotic speeches, dances, sporting events, bell ringing, bonfires, and illuminations, lighting candles in the windows of the houses. People sang songs about the leaders of the American and British armies. 2 popular songs were War and Washington and General Burgoyne's Surrender, about a British officer who lost a major battle in Saratoga, New York in 1777. Sometimes a firework display would end with a burst of 13 rockets. How could you tell who was a loyalist? A loyalist would not take the patriotic oath. Loyalists celebrated holidays that showed their support for England. The King's birthday was June 4th. Was celebrated each year with illuminations, a gun salute, and music and dancing. They sang songs such as God Save the King, and loudly cheered 3 huzzas for the health of the king. One way loyalists identified each other was by asking, what was to eat. A loyalist replied would include the word tea. Loyalists continued to drink tea throughout the war and buy products made in England if they could get them. If your family sided with the Patriots, how did you support the war? You may have shared food with soldiers when they marched by your house, but you didn't eat lamb. Sheep were needed to supply wool for soldiers' uniforms. Lead was needed to make ammunition, so families donated lead tools and other items to be melted and then molded into bullets. In July of 1776, patriots in New York City found a good source of bullets: a lead statue of King George on his horse. They pulled down the statue and carted most of it to the village of Litchfield, Connecticut, where it was molded into more than 40,000 bullets for the American muskets. Patriot women stopped buying English products such as tea and cloth. They would not wear black clothing even for funerals because black clothing came from Britain. They collected money and made clothes for the soldiers. There we go. Patriots showed their support by flying the new national flag, adopted by the Continental Congress on June 14, 1777. The flag had 13 red and white stripes and 13 white stars in a blue background. Families displayed the flag on many occasions throughout the year, especially on June 14th, which became known as Flag Day. If your family sided with the Loyalists, how did you support the war? Loyalists, even children, became the eyes and ears of the British because the British were fighting on land they didn't know. Loyalists provided information about roads, bridges, possible spots for campsites, and local supplies of food for the troops and their horses. Sometimes Loyalists would make maps and point out possible sites for a fight with the Continental Army. They took messages between British units. Some spied on Patriot troops, then passed on the information they learned. Other Loyalists openly supported the British. They joined the British Navy and guided their ships through the lakes, rivers, and harbors. Up to 30,000 Loyalists joined the British troops throughout the war. The Loyalists who didn't have guns could help by clearing roads and building bridges. They gave food and other supplies to the British troops and helped to hide British prisoners who escaped from the American prisons. You had to be very careful if you helped the British. To the Patriots, this was helping the enemy. Loyalists could be arrested and even hanged for treason. Would you have seen a battle? The American Revolution had more small fights than big battles. They all happened within 200 miles of the Atlantic Ocean and 1/3 took place in New York State. Some battles took place near farms and towns where people lived, and you might have seen or heard the fighting. In 1776, Abigail Adams, the wife of Patriot John Adams, wrote about a battle near their home in Massachusetts. I have just returned from Penn's Hill, where I have been sitting to hear the amazing roar of cannon. I could see every shell that was thrown. This battle went on night and day for more than 2 weeks. It was hard to sleep with the thundering of the cannon and explosions that made the windows rattle and the house shake. Did any women or children fight in the Continental Army? Boys often went to war with their fathers or older brothers. At age 16, boys could join the army. Younger boys might have played the drum, bugle, or fife for the soldiers. Nathan Futrell was a drummer boy in the North Carolina Continental Militia when he was 7 years old. At 10, Israel Task left his Massachusetts farm to be a cook and carry messages during battles. Women and girls took care of the wounded, cooked food, and washed and mended uniforms. Some women were part of the fighting too. They carried pitchers of water to cool down the cannons and give the men drinks. These women were called molly pitchers by the soldiers. When her husband was hurt, Mary Hayes stopped carrying the water and took over his job loading and firing the cannon. After the war, she was awarded a pension of $40 a year for her service. Families sometimes went with their men and the army. The armies didn't fight in winter, so General George Washington's wife, Martha, spent 8 years in winter camp with her husband, returning to Mount Vernon, their Virginia home, each spring. Was it hard to get money during the war? Because of the war, gold and silver coins were hard to come by, and the war cost a lot of money. To pay for the war, the Continental Congress asked each state to print its own paper money. At first, patriots used the paper dollars in support of their cause. However, this kind of money lost value because so much was printed and it was easy to copy. Many people called the paper money shin plasters because they felt it was only useful as a bondage for a sore leg, or as a bandage for a sore leg. People began to say it's not worth a continental when they meant something was not worth very much at all. This kind of situation is called inflation. It got so bad that in March of 1780, a paper dollar was worth just a fourth of a cent. And things kept getting worse. In May of 1781, it took 225 paper dollars to equal 1 gold dollar. A few weeks later, you needed 900 paper dollars to buy 1 gold dollar worth of supplies. It was said that it took a wagon load of money to buy a wagon load of food. Some soldiers even refused to be paid in paper money at all. They wanted hard gold. I can believe that. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and pick this up again in the next video.